Hey guys, welcome back to Friday at 1 with Jacqui. We've had some really good questions this week, so I think people are really starting to see the value in this kind of regular checking in on specific answers that will support you the best as well. So we're pretty happy to see that we're doing that. God, the weather's changing, so we'll also cover appetite today and what happens when the cold weather starts. Because I can see in the group there's been a few people who are a bit concerned about their, not cravings, but their leanings toward eating different foods, and we'll do the best to support that as well. So I'll get started with the first question. This one's a good one. Now the weather is cooling down and I like to drink my protein shake hot, so I put it in the microwave for a minute and it's just like a hot chocolate. So yummy. But it's true that is it true that some amount of protein gets lost when you warm it up? No. So no, the answer is no. So protein, and I usually use the example of an egg because people can relate to that. So protein is protein, whichever way you look at it. And when you look at the different consistencies of an egg, from a raw egg, which is stringy and slimy and soft, to maybe a soft scrambled egg, and then connect that to a hard boiled egg, you can see visually that the consistency of the egg is obviously very different, and that's due to the different temperatures that the egg is exposed to. And the process of that is called denaturing. So if you can imagine an actual protein, a molecule of protein is actually a whole link of, or a chain of many different amino acids. So there's 20 different amino acids. Some are essential, some are non-essential. And we'll go into that later on. But imagine you've got like a necklace, and that's your chain of amino acids or your protein. So when you eat your protein, your body actually needs acid to break apart those the chain of amino acids into single units. And then those amino acids are metabolized and shuttled off to all different parts of the body for their different functions, like making muscle, retaining muscle, making hormones, helping with like healthy neurotransmitter production, keeping your mood balanced, that sort of thing. They work with your immune system. So each different amino acid has a different name and has a different function. So the body takes in one whole big long chain of amino acids in the form of protein and breaks it down into small units, and then chooses where to send those units off to be utilised. So the cooking process is just a tighter linking of those aminos together. So if you're drinking a raw egg yolk, or a raw egg white, your body will find it quite easy to break apart those amino acid chains and utilise them, which is why, you know, soon after surgery, when your stomach acid is quite low and your tummy's recovering, soft foods are much more convenient for your healing body to break apart those proteins and use them. So soft scrambled eggs as opposed to a hard-boiled egg will be easier to digest. But in the heating process, nothing is lost as far as protein goes. There are certain nutrients that are quite heat sensitive, so things like B group in particular, if they're exposed to a lot of heat, they'll get lost in the process. So keep heating up your hot chocolate protein drink, and but you will just find that maybe it's just a bit harder for your body to digest it. So it's something to consider. If you are having trouble eating meat or digesting high protein foods, maybe try the softer forms of protein to see if that helps. If you are having trouble with eating meat, if it's making you vomit or it's sitting in your stomach for a really long time, it's a good indicator that you don't have much stomach acid present to break those chains down and digest the protein. More on that later. Thanks for that. So Julie's got a question. Would like to know what the difference is between BN Fibre and Peptipro, and do you need to take both? Fibre is quite different to the Peptipro. The Peptipro protein is a collagen-based protein source, and it's fairly tasteless. You can just mix it into drinks and smoothies and that sort of stuff. So its job is to, I like to say, on a busy day, its job is to make up the shortfall in your protein intake, because ideally we're trying to do it with food where possible if you're not in the very early stages. So the Peptipro, I think, is almost gram per gram protein. It does have one amino acid missing. So all of the collagen powders are not a complete protein. The feel-good protein that we stock in the blue bag has had the extra amino acid added to it. So it is a complete protein source, whereas all the other collagen powders on the market, unless stated otherwise, have got one amino acid missing, which means that will need to be made up through your diet in another way to make a complete protein. So Peptipro is geared towards protein intake. Collagens are great because they also have different benefits as far as your health goes. Really good for your skin, very good for your gut. So anyone with kind of food intolerance or what we call the real name for it is intestinal permeability. You may have heard of leaky gut, which is like a layman's term for that condition. And it's where the walls of the cells of your intestinal lining are like loose. They've got gaps in between them, and unprocessed food can slip through there and interfere with your immune system and that sort of thing. So collagens are very good for strengthening your mucous membranes, which line your intestinal wall, as well as very good for protein intake, obviously, as well as your skin, hair and nails. So that's the Peptipro. The BN Fibre is a totally different function. So we hear a lot about people having constipation or slow digestion or poor kind of detoxification processes after surgery. And it can be linked to the high protein diet, squeezing in all your protein and making sure you've got enough veggies and making sure you've got enough water is all a big mathematics game after surgery when you've got such limited space. So having a supplemental fibre can actually just help with increasing your fibre intake. I think the recommended range for fibre daily is about 40 grams. And to meet that through fruit and vegetables and carbohydrates and grains can be quite tricky. So you're looking at maybe just, again, using that as a supplemental product that helps to boost your fibre intake. The beauty of the BN Fibre is that it's proven to help with supporting the growth of a certain gut bacteria that's linked to better calcium absorption. So I think the studies showed on it that it increases your calcium absorption by about 20%, and that's via cleaning up your microbiome and setting yourself up with a nice range of healthy bacteria that support calcium absorption as well. So the fibre is what we call prebiotic, whereas like a bacteria or a probiotic are something that will, so prebiotic feeds the probiotics, and that's a game that needs to be played. So if you're putting in a probiotic, that's all good and well. You might be putting in like an Inner Health Plus or some kind of broad spectrum probiotic tablet. It's great, but unless it's supported with a really healthy diet that's got a nice high fibre content, those bacteria in your probiotic won't be given the best chance to actually proliferate and grow into groups. And that's what your ideal end game is with a probiotic, is to establish a whole range of healthy bacteria that have enough food provided by fibre and a healthy diet to set up like a crowd in your gut, which when we talk about gut, we're not just talking about the stomach, we're talking about everything that goes from your mouth all the way down to where your bottom is. So having a really good balance of healthy flora will help to protect you from invaders like gastroenteritis or E. coli, that sort of stuff. So they might get the chance to come in, but you'll have enough good bacteria to crowd them out and tell them to nick off. So that's the fibre. The fibre and the protein have a totally different function, but taking fibre when you've got a high protein diet is often very supportive. So I hope I answered your question. Thank you for that, Julie. Wendy is asking that I'm halfway through doing no meat in May as a challenge, which I've not heard of before. I need to look that up. It sounds fantastic. And I'm trying to have as much protein as I can, so eggs, lentils and nuts, etc. Is there anything else you can suggest? I'm also taking my multivitamins twice a day. So again, talking about protein and those less meat-based forms of protein. Plant-based protein will often have also limiting amino acids, so you also need to balance your carbohydrates to provide those extra, what are you called, the missing amino. So that's why vegetarians will mix beans with brown rice, because that will make a complete protein. So the research on that, they used to say it had to be in the same meal. You'd need to have your beans and your rice in the same meal. But now they're talking about a 24-hour window. So if you have your beans in the morning and you don't have anything that's containing that limiting amino acid until later on that afternoon, they'll find each other in your body and combine and make a complete amino acid or a complete protein. So I think what you're doing, you're on the right track with what it is you're taking in as protein. You might try tofu. Tofu is very good. Also tempeh, like the soy-based products. Tempeh is probably the cleanest. And tofu, I always go organic, and I never drink soy milk. There's lots of reasons for that. So you can include those. And for women, especially coming into perimenopause or menopause, it's a really good time to start to increase your just your intake of the soy products like tempeh and tofu, and just it provides a plant form of estrogen, so it helps to replace a little bit of that we're losing. So currently I just look at calculating your dietitian probably recommended how many grams of protein you should have each day. When you're doing something like this where you're eliminating a food group, you need to be aware of what you're actually taking in. So it's not so much about what you're doing, because your foods you're choosing are positive. It's more making sure that you're getting enough of the protein that you need. So for most patients, they're roughly, and it isn't personal to you, generally about 80 grams, 70 to 80 grams of protein every day. So it's not so much about changing what you're eating. It's more about making sure you're getting enough of it. Thank you. So the next question is Catherine. Hi, I take a multivitamin called Solgar, and I really like it, but the nutritionist told me I should be taking BN Multi. Can you tell me if there's a difference and if I really should take the BN instead? So, Catherine, I've done a bit of research and I had a look at the formulation for just the standard multi in the Solgar range, and it's broad and it covers everything that an individual might need, but certainly doesn't have enough as far as iron, B12, calcium. So I think from memory, I found it. I think from memory it had about 20 milligrams of calcium, which isn't enough for you. And the B12 is very low. It's also 75 micrograms of B12 in a cobalamin form. After surgery, the main nutrients that you have trouble with are B12, iron, vitamin C, vitamin D. So when I'm looking at substituting a bariatric formula for a standard multi, I always look at those particular levels and compare the formulation. So just as an example, the research on B12 for gastric sleeve and bypass patients was done on about 30,000 people. And they found that the recommended dose daily is between 350 and 500 micrograms. Your B12 absorption forevermore after surgery is affected for life. And is reduced to about as low as 1%. So if you're on your Solgar and you've got 35 micrograms of B12 in the formulation, you might be lucky to get 3. Whereas with the BN, and the other thing is that's a cobalamin form, which is harder for your body to absorb as well. If you take your BN multi, which I'm encouraging you to do, you'll get 500 micrograms of methylated B12, which means that your body doesn't have to do very much to that methylated B12 to make it user-friendly for you. So that's one example of one nutrient. In a day, if you're taking the chewable multivitamin from BN, you'll get 600 milligrams of calcium. With the Solgar, you'd get 40. So the minimum requirement for a weight loss surgery patient for calcium every day is 1,300 to, I think it's 2,500 milligrams a day, depending on your age. For women, it's very important, and it's particularly important for women after menopause to make sure you're getting your calcium needs. So there's just 2 examples of where the mainstream or the general use multivitamins will definitely let you down. And there's 2 great examples of why a bariatric multivitamin is recommended for life after surgery. Just saying. But that's just your insurance policy. If you're meeting your needs as recommended with a bariatric multivitamin, that's your insurance policy against health issues down the track that are related to nutrition and nutrient deficiencies. So if you want more information on our formulation and the research behind how we came to make the BN, please email me at Jacqui, Jacqui, at bnmulti.com, and I'm happy to answer any more questions on that one. Thank you. So Di has asked me, she's firstly said thank you for your fabulous tips, and I'll say you're very welcome. I'd like to know what protein substitute I can add to my stews and casseroles to give me a little extra protein. For this kind of dish, I wouldn't recommend the egg white protein because that would just be like cooked egg whites in your stew. The best one is the collagen powder, the Feel Good Blue collagen powder that's available on the website. Every scoop will provide, I think it's between 15 and 20 grams of protein. It adds no flavour and doesn't add any bulk. So you can add it to the stew base and you can cook it, and it generally doesn't change the consistency of it. The other thing I always add to like stew or soup or any of our chili dishes or our spaghetti bolognese or whatever it is, I always put in a tablespoon of the bone broth powder. And it just makes your sauces a little bit more rich and full of kind of substance, but it also adds a whole range of different minerals and nutrients as well. It's very good for your gut. So I hope that helped you. So Thea wonders if we could offer a sleeve reboot plan. This often comes up kind of 2 years after surgery where we're kind of a little bit off track sometimes, and more hungry. And there's different reboot plan, and I'm very careful about reboot plans or any other kind of plan or diet that you'll do for a period of time to make radical change and, you know, get you back on track. Because if you're doing something that's not a sustainable way of eating or lifestyle, if it's something that you're taking on and you can't do that for the rest of your life, I recommend you don't do it. So if you're looking at, you know, the 5-day sleeve reset, I see that quite a lot, where it's back to shakes and back to doing this and not eating much food. And some people will go back to puree stage, which they don't really need to. And it's just another form of almost dieting, which we don't want to go back to, because I think we ended up here because we've done every diet right. So what we're really aiming for is looking at a way that you can sustainably make healthy choices and set yourself up to succeed every week. So my sleeve reboot plan would be back to basics. Take your pantry, open the doors, and get rid of everything that you shouldn't be eating. It shouldn't be in the house. So anything that's refined carbohydrates, biscuits, pastries, quick, you know, 2-minute noodle kind of foods, that sort of stuff that's in a packet, it shouldn't necessarily be a feature in your eating plan or your daily intake if you're looking at continuing your weight loss. So we go back to basics, not a reboot diet, not a shakes diet, not anything radical, but making sure you're going back to protein first, dishing up your meals onto your portion plate. So the first year after surgery really is the time where these habits are encouraged. Also more effectively sometimes because you're not feeling as hungry, you can monitor your portion sizes. But that first year is really where you set yourself up to succeed as far as ongoing habits and the way that you do things. So everyone, and I know this has been a really hectic, emotional, different, out of routine time, and everyone's kind of feeling like, gee, I really need a reboot, but it's more about a replan. So maybe on a weekend, have a look at what you're going to eat next week and go to the shops and buy just the food that you need to make those good healthy foods. Plan it all out. Maybe grab a BN meal planner from the website. They're like $15, has a shopping list on it and has a space, a whiteboard for you to make your weekly food plan. And then just practice that. So making sure that foods that you shouldn't be eating, I don't like to say shouldn't, but foods that you're trying to avoid or not include as part of your healthy lifestyle choices. Don't have them in the house. I can't do it. I can't have things like that in the house because they'll sit in the cupboard and call my name and I'll end up eating them. So make it difficult for yourself to fail and make it easy to succeed by having everything that you need on hand and having a supportive environment around you. So that might come down to having a family meeting about what we're going to do moving forward around food, because these habits that pervade our family cluster will be our children's habits for the rest of their lives as well. So it's really great to get kids on board with new ways of looking at food, and big part of that is having them help you choose and go shopping with you and feel like they've got some say in what they're eating and how much of it as well. So it is a big umbrella I'm throwing out there, but there, again, just like the surgery, there's no magic bullet. So there's not necessarily a reboot plan. It's just a rethink. And we all need to rethink every now and then. But we need to be quicker at establishing the time that it's time for a rethink before things run away on us. And that's the key, is notice what you're doing and notice that things are changing. And then if they're not going in the positive direction you would like them to be quick to realise that and be very quick to, you know, be good at managing that. If you're finding that you've tried everything and you're just really not making these choices on a long-term basis, there may be other things that need to be looked at, and I generally encourage some counselling around that. And generally I recommend Glenn McIntosh's work. He does a lot of the weight loss management psychology, and he's got some amazing resources. So you'll find his website and subscribe to newsletters and that sort of stuff, just get an understanding of what's involved there. But a lot of it can be learned behaviour or sabotage. So once we start to succeed, our body or our brain is not quite used to being successful, and doesn't really know what to do with that. So sometimes these little parts of us will come up and start to cut us off at the knees when we're starting to do well. And it could be other people in your life who do that. They're not thriving on seeing you thrive. They're, buying you good food that you shouldn't be eating and treating you to things. And they're conversations that we need to have with other people in our lives who are having those impacts as well. So I hope that answers your question. Next question is from Penny. Oh, and there's a mention of the Get Back on Track After Your Weight Loss Surgery book, and that's another wonderful tool we've got on our website as well. Alex Shirley wrote that one, and I'll be doing a podcast with them later on in the year too. Penny says, I've always been confused about how much protein I need. At one stage I was told I was deficient, but now I'm concerned I may be eating too much. What's the correct amount? So what's the correct amount and how does it show up in a blood test? So, again, no magic number, but generally the recommendation for protein intake is anywhere between 0.9 and 1.2 grams of protein per kilogram of your ideal weight. So don't do it based on your if you're still losing weight, don't do it based on your current weight. You do it on your planned weight. So overall, it generally ends up being kind of 1 gram for every kilogram. So if you're 70 kilograms, you'd be looking for about 70 grams of protein each day. That changes again, and this is where your dietitian should come in to helping you with your goals, is it changes depending on your activity levels and your needs as far as that goes. If you're training and doing, high intensity exercise 4 or 5 times a week and you're going to the gym and lifting weights and you're running 4 days a week, you'll need more protein because you'll be needing to refuel those muscles and build more so you're getting stronger. If your job is quite sedentary and you're just, your exercise is just walking or it's not sort of as demanding, you probably won't need as much. But a rule of thumb is kind of 1 gram of protein per kilogram of ideal weight per day. It shows up in a blood test in a couple of different ways, protein deficiency. We look at albumin, and there's a couple of other markers. I'd have to have another look. I haven't seen that one for a little while. But you can see it in your bloods. Sometimes if you feel like you're eating enough protein but being told you're deficient, it can come down to absorption. So always look at that as well. And there was another question. Oh, it's not in this group of questions, but we were talking about this morning patients who feel confused because they can eat, 2 donuts or a packet of chips or bickies or things that, or like those Arnott's shaped biscuits. Why can I eat a packet of those but I can't fit in a standard, healthy meal? The reason for that can be what we call their slider foods. So this is a term that's used in the weight loss surgery community because these foods like, say, for example, Pringle chips, corn chips, what about a Mars bar, foods that are quite big when they're out in the world and take up space. So think of a Mars bar, it's 100 grams. Once you chew up and melt down that Mars bar, for instance, or any kind of chocolate, how much room does it take up in your tummy? It becomes quite liquid and doesn't take up room. The other thing to think about when you're looking at which foods make you feel full and which foods leave you feeling hungry is where they're digested. So much of the reasons we look at a protein first meal plan is because that stays in your stomach to get digested. So if you can imagine putting in, 40 grams of meat, 30 grams of veggies and a little bit of rice, that would be kind of and the grams are probably not right, but that's kind of a well-rounded meal. Put your protein in first and that's in your belly trying to get worked on and digested. So generally the brain will then trigger a signal saying, oh, okay, food in the tummy, not so hungry anymore. The other thing with a protein-based meal is that it will stay in your tummy to be digested, whereas biscuits and chips and Mars bars and that sort of stuff, they go, carbohydrates don't stay in the stomach, they go straight through into the small intestine. So then you've got empty tummy and lots of calories and probably some fat and all the other stuff that we're not looking at making part of every day. So don't get me wrong, I mean, balance needs to be always key. If you're removing everything that's classed as junk and a no-no, you're going to find that that denial will sometimes enhance your cravings for those kind of foods. So a balance of things is really always important, but it's the methodology you use in putting them into your body. So I work with my rule of thumb is that we look for 80-20 in life. In life, it's been shown that 80-20 rule is where there's success. So if 80% of the time you're spot on, you're eating your protein, you've got healthy fats in your diet, and you've got your fruit and veggies in there, you've got 20% of the time where you can enjoy those things that you love. But I also encourage you to really find which foods are your absolute favourite and have some personal rules around what you will and won't eat. So if I go out and there's fish and chips, or there's potato chips, or I've got a choice between potato chips and some cheese and some red wine, I always have a rule that I don't do potato chips, because I just find, for me, nice but not float my boat completely, whereas nice piece of cheese drizzled with a little bit of honey and one glass of red wine, that's what I would do. So having a look at our discretion in what we eat is really important, and setting yourself up with, no, I just don't do that. So you have these rules around foods that you just don't do, but Portuguese tart I would do, but ice cream I'm not that fussed on, so if it's offered I'll say no. So that means I've got more of control over, or an understanding of what my personal rules are, what I will and won't do around food. So it makes it much easier, because when I am in these situations and fish and chips are presented, I'll just say, no, I don't do that. And I don't care. They might do that. Other people might do that, but I just don't do that. Whereas I'll say yes to Portuguese tart and someone else go, oh, that's just a waste of time, I would never do that. So everyone has their thing. And it's up to you to find your thing, and really, if you're going to do those things, do them well. But to be very discerning around what you do and don't do, and maybe sit down and write down the foods that you will use as your indulgences, and other foods that you'll just say no to now. And that will make it much easier, because you just go, no, it's on my list of no, so not doing it. I hope that helps too. So slider foods are things that are big outside in the world and small and mushy when they go into your tummy, and they're the ones that will sneak up. Salada biscuits, Jats crackers, those sorts of things. And that's why we encourage you to look for really dense, seedy biscuits and things that actually make the body work. The other thing is that there's another element of that, which is called thermogenesis, and it's the amount of energy it takes for you to actually consume or digest that food. So protein, I think about 30 or 40% of the 30% maybe of the calories in protein are utilized in the digestive process. So you can see you get a bit more bang for your buck, whereas sugar just goes straight in, and it's so easy. It's so easy to just convert sugar into glucose and off you go. Whereas protein is a whole lot of process and a lot more involved in making that into something that your body can use and store as a benefit. So I think we've done all the questions. And we did a poll last week also just about the timing, and I think kids are going back to school next week. Yay! And also people, humans, men, women, adults are going back to work, and how that looks for everybody's, I don't know. It's been a very interesting time, and I hope it's, not as stressful as it was as we regain some normality. But we have revised the time, and I think I'll post it in the group. I'm pretty sure we decided on a Monday night. So I will double check that. I'm pretty sure we said Monday night at 7. So we'll post it in the group. Please keep your questions up. I've got a couple of questions in the comments. We've got Sue Reed's here. Natasha, why do many people, I don't know why many people, I don't think it's many people. Why do many people not like the taste of the chewables? It's a personal thing. We don't get much feedback on we don't like the flavour. I also look at, same thing I was saying about being discerning around what you will and won't eat. It's like, what will you just put up with for 2 minutes, as opposed, and say, you know, for your health and your well-being for the rest of your life, for 2 minutes of tasting the orange flavour, would you do that to maintain your health? So I don't know. It's a personal thing. I think it's generally personal. I don't know. I have no answer. Thank you, though, for your time. And I'll see you next week. Bye.